welcome to Kids Rule TV, brought to you by English Heritage. I'm Esme and I'll be taking you on a fun-filled escapade through English history. We'll have historians accompanying us along the way to share some fascinating facts, as well as a couple of other helpers, but more on them later. So if you've ever thought, who lived at Dover Castle? Or why did King Henry VIII get married 6 times? Then you've come to the right place. Coming up in today's show, we're heading back 185 years to the reign of Queen Victoria in a period known as the Victorian times. Joining us is historian Dr. Amy Boyington, who'll talk to us through what life was like for the rich and the poor. We'll be stopping by the kitchen of the wonderful Mrs. Crocombe to whip up some delicious Queen's Drop biscuits. And our illustrator Wesley will take you through a step-by-step guide to drawing Queen Victoria herself. So, let's begin this week's show. Now, before we do anything fun, we need to go back a little further. Right. Queen Victoria was a niece of the last king of the Georgian era, William IV, who had no legitimate children of his own to inherit the throne. Victoria wasn't married when she became queen, but married Albert a couple of years after coming to the throne. To find out more about life for the rich and poor in Victorian England, we need some expert help. And I know just the person. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Esme.
So I wonder if you can talk to us about what life was like in Victorian England if you were poor.
Of course. So the life of the poor was actually terrible. It was incredibly difficult because they had to do long hours of back-breaking work in factories or in mines just to earn enough money to eat. So that could mean, for adults, that could mean 12 to 18-hour shifts. For children as young as 9, that often meant 9 hours a day. Can you imagine doing that? And then even at the end of this super long week, they only got enough money just to earn a crust of bread to eat or a hovel to live in.
Did things eventually get better for people working in factories?
Well, to some extent they did. So during this period, a number of laws were passed by Parliament to try and protect people from exploitation in the workplace and to try and improve their working conditions. So, for example, in 1833, the Factory Act was passed, and that declared that children under the age of 9 could only be employed in silk factories. And it also declared that children between 9 and 12 could only work 48 hours a week. So although that was better than what it was before, that still wasn't a huge leap forward in terms of progress. This act also declared that anyone under the age of 18 was no longer allowed to work at nights and that their employers had to give them an hour's lunch break. So some progress was made during this time.
Wow, that sounds incredibly difficult, even for an adult, let alone a child. What about schooling?
So, well, because children needed to earn money and because their parents needed that extra money, they were just sent to work for most of the time. So that didn't really allow much time for education. But the children did have to go to school, but only 2 hours per day. And even then, when they were sort of learning things, it was all in the workplace. So, for example, they were taught how to work the machines, and many of which were incredibly dangerous, and loads of injuries happened during this time. But we have to put that into context because life in general for the poor was incredibly dangerous because disease was rife. So we had cholera, measles, scarlet fever, just to name a few, that often took the lives of children and adults.
So why was it called the Industrial Revolution?
So it was called the Industrial Revolution because it was a transition in Britain from home-produced products to factory-produced products. And so from the mid-1700s, people had started to rely more and more on machines. And this meant that things could be produced more quickly, at a faster rate, and for less money. And this transition or revolution spanned the whole of the 1800s, and that changed how Britain approached manufacturing forever.
Who is making money out of the factories?
Well, unfortunately, it was the rich factory owners, the rich mine owners, and they just sort of got richer and richer as time went on. Some rare times, some poor people from the lower classes were able to change their fortune through hard work and potentially some lucky opportunities. They were still not accepted in society by those who were considered more privileged, so the aristocrats at the time, who'd been born into their money. So there was always this class boundary or this class sort of pressure between the lower classes and the upper classes, and it was very difficult to reconcile.
Interesting. And what was being made in these factories?
I mean, all kinds of things, absolutely everything. So we had cotton manufacturing, silk manufacturing. We also were making iron and steel, cement and paper, glass, anything you could want, really. It was such a time of industry. And these products could be produced really quickly because of the invention of the steam-powered engine. And that meant that water power, so the water wheel and rivers, that kind of energy wasn't needed anymore because we had steam-powered engines which were far more efficient. And so factories could therefore be built anywhere. They didn't have to be built next to rivers anymore. And so they popped up everywhere. I mean, we had ironworks in Yorkshire and then coal mines in Wales and cotton mills in Lancashire. It was across the country.
Now, the textile industry is often associated with cotton and silk production, but there were plenty of other things being made for this enormous industry as well, weren't there?
Yes, that's right. A good example of this is a site in our care called Stott Park Bobbin Mill, and that's located in the Lake District. And as you can imagine, it made bobbins.
So you'll have to explain, what is a bobbin?
Yes, a bobbin, as you can see, is a cylindrical sort of item, and it was used to wrap thread around, and then this was used for sewing. So the bobbins made at Stott Park were made from wood, and we know that a large workforce was needed to create these bobbins. And we also know that children worked in the mill. So, for example, there was a 12-year-old boy called Edward Masheter who was apprenticed to the mill. And he worked there in 1865 and he had to do 10-hour days.
Well, let's find out what his typical day was like. Here's a video to find out more. Meet Edward Masheter, a 12-year-old apprentice at Stott Park Bobbin Mill in 1865. Edward wakes up early for a 10-hour shift at the bobbin mill, where he works 6 days a week. Some adults at the mill have to work 12 to 18-hour days. His clothes are tatty and he's tired and hungry, but it's still much better than being in Ulverston workhouse, where he lived and worked in harsh conditions until he became an apprentice under his boss, Mr. Walton. The mill makes wooden bobbins that cotton is wound around. Working here with saws, drills and cutting machines can be dangerous. Ed starts the day stacking freshly cut wooden poles in the barn so they can dry for a year. Ed carries dry wooden poles into the factory so the men at the machines can start cutting them into shorter lengths on a saw to make blanks for the bobbins. After a few years as an apprentice, Ed will start to use the machines. He spots one with a drill that bores holes to make the bobbins. There's also a lot of sawdust and wood chips from the cutting machines. Ed inhales lots, which makes breathing hard. Once each man has made 144 bobbins, called a gross, Ed collects them and takes them to the drying room. The floor is covered in wood chippings from the machines. There are paths to walk between the piles, but Edward manages to slip on his way through. Ed takes the larger bobbins to other apprentices who are gluing small tops and bottoms, called flanges, onto the bobbins to hold the cotton in place. At the end of the day, it's time to knock off the machines and finish for the day. After his apprenticeship, Ed will learn the skills to make the bobbins on the machines. And you can still visit Stock Park today. Now that we've got a good idea what life was like for the poor during Victorian times, let's see how those at the other end of the scale were doing. I think we need our expert again. Amy, are you there?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
We know that life was incredibly hard for the poor, but what about the royal family?
So the royal family, as you can imagine, was very rich during this time. And so as a result, life was very, very different. So Victoria, she became queen at only 18, and that was in 1837. She had grown up in Kensington Palace, and then when she became queen, she moved into Buckingham Palace. And at her coronation, did you know that over 400,000 people lined the streets to catch a glimpse of their glamorous new queen? It was such an exciting time. And then a few years later, she married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and they were really deeply in love, which is amazing. And over the next 16 years, she gave birth to 9 children. And so she sort of set the model for like the perfect family unit with a husband, a mother, and a large family. But she was also incredibly rich in her own right. So she was given by Parliament a sort of a salary, we can call it, of about £385,000 a year, which in today's money is about £23.5 million.
Wow. And how did the Queen spend her money?
Well, she liked to spend it on a whole range of things. She really loved the arts. So she would buy things like paintings and sculptures. And she also liked to sort of engage in architecture. For example, in 1845, she and her husband, Prince Albert, bought a large estate called Osborne on the Isle of Wight. And they bought that for £28,000. And then they decided to build themselves a beautiful holiday home, and that became known as Osborne House. And this was built in the style of an Italian palazzo, and it was eventually completed in 1851. And it's surrounded by beautiful gardens because they love to just go and walk with their family and enjoy tea in the gardens and sit under the trees and read. So we have a really wonderful view of what they used to do in their spare time. And they loved it so much that they decided to build for their children a sort of playhouse, but it was a large playhouse called the Swiss Cottage. And in this little cottage, there was a fully working kitchen and a little sitting room. And the royal children got to go and learn how to cook and learn how to be sort of little adults. And it was one of their favourite places to go.
That sounds very fun. What about rich children who weren't royals?
So the life of the rich child was incredibly different to the poor children, as you can, I'm sure, imagine. So they lived in large households and they didn't have to work. and they had pretty much everything done for them by servants. And they were brought up by nannies and they were taught by governesses at home. So they didn't necessarily go to school. However, when boys were aged about 10, they were sent off to private boarding schools to learn or have a formal education. But girls had to stay home and they continued being taught by their governesses at the time. And then if we think about weekends, they did have free time, whereas, poor people didn't. Rich children were able to play games and sports. They went to museums, galleries, and they went to the seaside. And of course, they had a lot more toys. And so toys and toy markets sort of boomed during this period of time. And they had bikes, cricket sets, dolls houses, rocking horses, even train sets. So they really had an amazing time. Also, some children were lucky enough to be taken on holiday. And as we know, trains really took off during this period of time, which meant that travelling around the country to Scotland or Cornwall or Wales was a lot easier and faster. So families would go off to the seaside or they would go off to Scotland for a week or two. And they also sometimes got to go abroad if they were very lucky.
Well, thanks so much, Amy. It's been great talking to you.
My pleasure.
To find out what life was like in the country household of a wealthy Victorian family, we sent 2 English Heritage members to visit Audley End House in Saffron Walden, where they met Mrs. Crocombe, the cook to Lord and Lady Braybrooke, and of course sampled one of her delicious recipes. Let's see how they got on.
And hi, I'm Jack. We're here today at Audley End. We're going to jump back in time to find out what life was like in the kitchen at Audley End House in 1881. We're going to meet the cook, Mrs. Crocombe, to find out more.
Come in. Ah, you must be Master Ollie and Master Jack.
Mrs. Warwick, the housekeeper, sent us. We'd like to find out more about the kitchen here.
Well, you both look well-mannered, and I hope your shoes are clean. I am making a sweet custard dish for Lord Braybrooke. Would you like me to show you how?
Yes, please.
Well, firstly, I set a custard, and then I've cut it up into squares, and I'm piling it in this dish like a mountain. It's called Sneelmilch, and I read it was one of the favourites of the Queen's children when they were your age.
Are you the only one who works here?
I'm in charge, but there are 4 of us who work here. Myself, then Mary Ann, my first kitchen maid, Sylvia, my second kitchen maid, and Annie Chase, who works in the scullery, mostly washing up.
Is it hard work?
We have to cook for Lord and Lady Braybrooke and all their guests, as well as all the servants. And the servants don't eat the same dishes as Lord and Lady Braybrooke, so we do have to make a lot of food. Are your hands clean? Oh, well then perhaps you'd like to help me.
Yes, please.
Well, what I'm going to use are some pistachio nuts for decoration, but they need to be pounded to small bits. Do you think you could do that, Ollie? Good. And for you, Jack, I'm going to get you to whisk some of this sweetened cream.
Where do you and the other servants eat?
Well, most of the servants eat in the servants' hall, but I sit with the housekeeper, Mrs. Warwick, Mr. Lincoln the butler, the more important servants, on a different table. Do you know, meal times are the only times we get to see the other servants. They don't come in here. Even the family and usually the guests never come into the kitchens. Now, how's that cream getting on? Let me have a look. Oh, yes, that's perfect. I can now start to spoon it on.
How's the food Who gets Lord Braybrook's table?
Now, that is the job of the footman and Mr. Lincoln the butler. See, I make the food here in the kitchen and then it leaves through the hatch just by the door. The dining table is on the other side of the house and upstairs, so the footmen have to move very quickly. Mr. Lincoln and I have to be very organised.
Are there any children here at Audley End House?
Well, not since I've been here, only visitors like yourselves. Lord and Lady Braybrook have a daughter, Augusta, but she's married now and got her own house. There. Now, how are those pistachios coming on?
Good.
Oh, well done, Master Ollie. They do look good. I'll be able to sprinkle them on very easily. No, we don't want you spoiling your dinner. Would you like one of my Queen Drop biscuits? They are my favourite.
Oh, yes.
What do you think? Now, I'm going to add some of these rose petals to decorate my schneelmilch.
It looks lovely.
Oh, you must wait till later.
Oh.
Would you like me to serve this to the nursery this evening?
Yes, please.
Our recipe today is named after Queen Victoria, Queen's Drop biscuits. Let's take a look at what you'll need. 225 grams of butter, 225 grams of sugar, 3 eggs, 340 grams of flour, 225 grams of currants, and a few drops of almond extract. And here's some I made earlier. Not bad, eh? Not only are these pretty easy to make, but they're like a cake in the middle and a biscuit on the outside. So it's like 2 snacks in one. Right, now let me take a bite. Now it's time for some crafting. This week, our Kids Rule illustrator Wesley is going to show us how to draw Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Get your pens at the ready and let's get creative. Over to you, Wesley.
So we'll begin with a big semicircle for the top of Victoria's hair. Then we can loop that down, back up, do a little side parting in the middle, and again loop that down and join. And we could add some little hairs in the middle. Then we can add a small wavy line behind that for a lace bonnet. Next, add a little curve for an ear, and then a big loop down for a chin, back up, and another little curve for the other ear. You can do 2 little curves for the insides of the ears. And then 2 semicircles for her eyes. We want her looking a bit unamused. So one sort of high arched brow, and then the other a bit lower. A little pointy nose. And a little unhappy mouth. And then for the chest, we want just a sort of rectangle shape below her chin. So for the body, if we come out to that corner, come out to the left, We want a sort of shield shape. So go down, and then do the same on the right, out, and bring it down to a point. Then we can add a bit of a frill, so lots of squiggly lines. Bring that up, and the same again the other side. Then we can add some more details, a line down the middle, and a few little buttons. For the hands we want a little line coming down, curving across and down, and then 4 little fingers. And the other hand will be sort of clasped behind, so all we do is bring a little line down again like we did before, and then tuck it behind the 4 fingers. And we can add a squiggly line for a cuff, coming down, and then back up and join those. Do the same again this side, another squiggly line. Then come along, down, across and back up. Do the same again the other side. So we want to make these cuffs quite fancy, quite elaborate. And if we come up just below the top of her body, and a big curve, join them the top of those cuffs. And the same again the other side. And then we can go back up to the top of the body and bring that all the way down and a bit lower this time, and back up and join. The same again the other side, all the way down and join that to finish the arms. Now that's done, we can add a wavy line sort of behind her head, coming behind the arm and tucking behind the body. We can also add a little bow in there behind that as well. For her dress, we want just a big curve that comes out behind the arm all the way down, almost to the bottom of the page, and then another big wavy line right across. A really big dress. And we can do the same the other side, behind the arm and curved all the way down to join. And then you can do a big frill at the bottom underneath that with another squiggly line. Then we can fill in this dress with a few more ruffles, a few more lines. So some wavy lines going across, and again lots of sort of squiggles, some lace, that kind of detail going across underneath. We can do that a few more times. And that's Victoria done. So for Albert, we want to start about 3/4 of the way across the page, a bit higher than Victoria, and with a big, almost egg-shaped top of his head, so a big semicircle. And then we can do a little squiggle at the bottom of that for some hair, and then a line coming behind the top of his head and joining that squiggle. And another line behind on the other side, ending in a few more squiggles, little curls of hair. And on the right, little curve round for his ear, the same again on the left, and then join those two up with a big curve downwards. So yeah, we have a big sort of egg-shaped head. Then we can do a few stray hairs at the top, bit of a comb over. And we can do two little dots for eyes. Some eyebrows. Some little bags under his eyes. Big pointy nose. And a little itchy moustache. We want him also looking quite serious, because Victorians looked a bit serious in their photos, as they had to hold still quite a long time, so a little straight mouth. And then a line by his ear, and then another coming out and down, and the same again on the right hand side, down by his chin, and then coming back up underneath the hair, and a little line by the ear for some itchy mutton chops this time. And we can add a few little stray hairs as well. Next we want to come down from his chin, across and back up for his collar. And then we can do a little circle in the middle and add a bow tie underneath that. And if we bring that line in that corner all the way down, about in line with Victoria's hands, do the same again on the right hand side. Go down and up, join those two in a sort of V, and do another one a bit higher up, and join those two down with the line in the middle. Put a little collar on his waistcoat, and then add a few buttons for details. Then we can do another line down in the middle and add some more buttons on his shirt. Next, if we start a couple of centimetres to his left, draw a shoulder, same again on the right, and then down from his waistcoat behind Victoria's dress, and then down from his left shoulder, leave a gap, and bring that down to almost join that line there. And we can take the right hand side all the way down in a big swoosh. That can be the bottom of his coat. Again, leave a gap on the top of his shoulder, join that down in, go out over his hip and down to the bottom of his frock coat. Then from his armpit, go down at an angle and then back in, join that. So it's like his arm is behind his back. Do the same again a bit further out to make that arm a bit thicker. And then we can give a big pointy lapel again on his frock coat. Do the same again on the left hand side, out, back in. We can take his shoulder on his left and bring his arm just down behind Victoria, and the same again below. And then for his trousers, if we leave a gap between his coat, come all the way down in line with the dress, cross for the bottom of his trousers, and then go back all the way down again, finish off that leg, and go back up and do the left hand side behind the dress. And then we can draw a line going across behind his leg and joining up at the edge of his coat. So that's the back flap of his coat. And then we can add just a simple little shoe underneath his trousers and a few buttons on his coat. And there's Albert.
Thanks, Wesley. That was fantastic. How did you guys get on at home? Here's my creation. What do you think? Not bad for a first attempt. The team here at Kids Rule would love to see your creation. So if you've had a go at making Queen Drop biscuits or drawn some characters from history, do share them with us here at kids@english-heritage.org.uk. And that brings us to the end of our show. It's been amazing, and I hope that, like me, you've learned a lot. Don't forget to subscribe, and for more activities and fascinating history facts, make sure to visit the Kids Rule website. See you next time.